Okay, I think we're a few minutes past the hour, so maybe we can just hop into intros and get going because we have a lot of material to cover. My name's Zoe. I mentioned I'm the head of product marketing here. We usually have my colleague Hope Supanik, who's the head of customer success, but she had a clash today. But so Tucker's representing revenue and customer success.
Hello, team. It's my pleasure to do so. Hope and our AEs and our CDMs have likely worked with most of you in the past, making sure you are supported and on the correct plan. It is, I can't say great to see you all because I'm seeing your names, not your faces, but lovely having you all here. Thanks for coming.
My name is Carol Guest. I'm on the product team and we'll be sharing some of the features that we've been working on recently. So excited to share what we've been working on and get your feedback.
Yeah, and I'm JH, head up the product team here at User Interviews. I'm sure people on my team have spoke to many of you for feedback and input, so it's cool to see all the names that we recognize. And yeah, it's always just such an inspiring moment for us to see how many people turn up for these, and it's really exciting for us to share all the stuff we've been up to. So excited for this. Yeah, so I'll kind of take us through the agenda and the plan for today and then hand it off to Carol to let her dive into all these items. But as I mentioned, we have a lot of cool stuff to walk through today. There's sort of 5 main themes that you can see on the screen here. So closing the loop on projects and your sessions within user interviews, streamlining unmoderated research, managing a panel of your own users, setting guardrails for researchers on your team, and researching with confidence knowing that we're secure and accessible. I think just as a kind of macro point on all this, what we really try to do at User Interviews is help you with all of your participant needs for all of your research, right? So regardless of what type of participant you need and what sort of methodology you might be doing, we want to make sure that we can be a great resource for those things. And so that manifests in a couple ways. We help you find participants who might be a good fit for you through our Recruit product. We help you manage your own users in our Research Hub product. And then we really make sure that it's easy to facilitate across any methodology that you may need to use. And increasingly, we're going to be integrating with more and more testing tools. And around all of that, we try to make sure that it's really easy to collaborate. Since we know research is a team sport, it involves sensitive data, and we want to make sure that you have the right access and permissions to everything so that you and your colleagues can do great research together. So that's kind of how we see the world, and you'll see kind of across these items, different flavors of that as we go through them. And so Carol will be the one leading you through all the details of what's been released or what's coming soon. And then I will probably jump in periodically because I'm very excited about all these items and can't help myself from maybe highlighting a couple things as we go. So that's the plan for today. And then we'll try to make sure that we have a good 5-10 minutes at the end for Q&A and some engagement around all the questions you have. So as we're going, please use the Q&A feature. Once questions are in there, people can upvote them. It's really helpful for us to know where we should focus our attention. So as you have a question, just add it, and then we can get to it either real time or at the end. And yeah, we'll have some fun polls as we go too for some engagement. So with that, Carol, you want to kick it off?
Yes.
So before you start, and sorry, an unexpected shout out to everybody here. We are going to be at a first conference in 2 years in Brooklyn. We're going to the Learners UXR and Reapps Conference, June 6, 7, 8. We're going to have a booth. We're going to have business cards. We're going to be there. We're going to have a party with beer and food. So if any of you are going to be at either of those conferences in June in Brooklyn, we would love to host you. Say hello or both. Shoot me a message in the chat, and I'll make sure you are added to our list. Carol, sorry for the card. Sorry for the interruption.
No, excited about that.
Great news. Having a party. Great. So excited to share a lot of what we've been building over the last several months. We have a lot of good things to share today. I wanted to start with several features that we've been building to help what we're saying close the loop within user interviews. These are features that are commonly requested, things that you sort of had to do offline that we are now excited that we've been able to bring part of the process into the app. And so our goal with many of these 2 features I'm going to share is that we can save you time. And before I go into explaining those specifically, I did just want to make sure that we're always having a pulse on what takes you the most time in user interviews. So I wanted to start with a poll question right at the top here, which is when you think about your work in user interviews, what is the most time-consuming part of your work? And so you should see on your screen a poll question. and I'll give us just sort of 30 seconds to answer. And some of, I'll actually read through the answers. So some of the options are setting up the criteria in the screener, reviewing and selecting participants, scheduling participants, or closing sessions and paying participants.
It's our first time doing polls. It's really cool to see the live results. It's like an election moving up and down. So thank you for the engagement.
All right. So let's see. So I think what we're seeing is the most common. I'll share the results here. Do y'all see it? Yeah, great. So the most common one we saw was the initial project setup, setting up the criterion screener, then sort of going through the project flow. It's getting faster, reviewing and selecting participants, scheduling, and then closing and paying participants. So actually the two things I'm going to share are more in the last section, which already doesn't take much time, but hopefully it takes even less time. And yeah, thanks for sharing we'll continue to look at sort of the things that take a lot of time at the top of the workflow there. So the two things I wanted to share that we've done recently to make it easier to close out a session and a project. The first is that we have now created a way that you can close a project from within our application. And this is an often requested feature with some of the main goals being to save you time and to sort of organize your work. So when you close a project within the application, it'll then get removed from your dashboard and you can get the invoice right away and you can stop recruiting, just sort of like get it out of your way if it's done. And the other benefit to us is it gives us another signal of how the project went. So you can see here that some of the things we ask about are if you considered it a success and any detail about it, which helps us understand for projects that were successful, what made them successful, and for projects that weren't successful, what made them not successful. So really important signal for us. And I just mostly wanted to highlight that this now exists. So 70% of projects that we closed in April did so with an app. So I think most of you are using it. But if you didn't know that it exists, definitely encourage you to use it, and also be sure to give us any additional feedback so we can continue to improve. On a related vein, another thing that we're now doing within the app is that you can report suspicious participants within the application. So broadly, we believe that the quality of our panel is one of our differentiators and something that we feel strongly about. And it's worth saying that fraud in the app is itself quite rare. That said, it does happen, and we notice that when it does happen, it happens a lot in a specific project. So maybe somehow a bad actor figures out how to sign up as a participant in a specific project, and then that project might have a few people who are misrepresenting themselves. And we absolutely want to prevent this from happening. So what you can now do is at the point that you are marking a session complete, you can also use this little report option to give us more details about what happens if you felt like someone was misrepresenting themselves. And then we can further investigate and also take the step to either backfill that with a different participant or just sort of remove them from the project. So again, hope this saves you time. And then I think very importantly for us, we hope this gives us a better signal about fraud on the platform so that we can use that to inform further investment. So behind the scenes, we are doing things like identifying before someone gets presented to you if we think they have some sort of risky signals. And this will continue to help us understand when that's happening. Also worth mentioning that this is currently available after you complete a session. And one thing we're exploring now is being able to have you report someone who seems suspicious before a session. I think this came up actually in the last product talk, so that if the screener seems obviously a bit off, you can report that, and then we can have a signal to remove that person from the application.
Yeah, super excited about that one, just in terms of, we realize that researchers are spending so much time vetting the people that they talk to that we could just get such a quality signal from you all. So excited to kind of pull that in more and more structured ways.
We've got a relevant question from Neil. Thank you, Neil. As the admin for my hub, can I see which projects are rated successful and those notes too?
Yeah, that's a great question. Not currently, but that's good feedback. I think one thing that's worth knowing is we have a team internally that is focusing full time on the needs of organizational admins and how they're managing research across their whole team. And what we're trying to do is make sure that we identify what those biggest pain points and needs are for them so that they can address those obviously in a thoughtful priority order and sequence. And so this is not one we've heard, but really helpful to know and probably pretty straightforward to surface some of that data. So we can circle back on that. In the interim, it's probably something we can pull for you manually if you need like a one-time snapshot. So you could always reach out to a support team for that. But I will pass that along to the team thinking about the admin needs.
Great. So I want to shift gears now and talk about unmoderated research. We've seen an increase in unmoderated research on our platform, and sort of two things that are driving it. One is for researchers who are using Hub, so they're working with a panel of their own users. We often hear that they want to do a variety of different types of research with those users. So they might want to do user interviews, which is what we're historically more known for, or they might want to do an NPS survey or a usability test with a set of users who have given feedback in that. And so they want to be able to do a variety of types of research with that same set of users. And then we also hear a lot from people who are using unmoderated tools that they want to be able to either recruit niche participants or want higher quality participants, and they come to user interviews to provide those participants for them. And so we often see that people are coming to us to provide, they want to use the user interviews panel in concert with various unmoderated tools. And so we're doing some work to make it easier to do that, both on the participant side and then on the researcher side. So before I jump into, again, what we're doing there, I did just want to ask this group about your own practice with unmoderated studies, and specifically what types of unmoderated research you do most frequently. So whether that's surveys or more usability testing, or if your team is not doing unmoderated research, we'd also love to know that as well.
These live polls are fun.
I really want to like participate, but A, I don't do research, and B, I'm a panelist, so I guess I'm not allowed to.
Yeah, no voting, Tucker.
I mean, I would if I could, but Zoe has prevented us.
Great. Okay, so I think y'all can see the results here. So by far the most common is surveys, and then unmoderated usability testing. And it looks like most all of the teams are doing some type of unmoderated testing. So excited to share some of what we've been doing. Particularly, I think with the surveys, you'll see some of the benefits. So I mentioned that there are sort of two sides to streamlining unmoderated research. One is the participant experience and the other is researcher side. So on the participant side, we built our initial experience around moderated studies, as you might expect. And so we think there are some things that we can do to make the participant experience just much more streamlined, where they can clearly understand that they can apply for a study, get directly into a task, complete the task, and do it sort of in one fell swoop, where today there's a few steps along the way. So we're doing some work to sort of streamline the experience there. And then on the researcher side, it's all about scale. I think this is particularly true about surveys, where the types of things you could do in a moderated study, like sort of manually track the progress of each participant or mark them complete, is much more difficult when you're doing a survey. So we want to make that more scalable. And the main way that we're doing that is with integrations.
Yeah. One quick point just on this, or I guess 2 quick points. On the historical piece, back in the pre-COVID times, if you can believe it, about 40% of our research was for in-person moderated. And so we spent a lot of time, at that phase of our company solving all those logistical needs of how do you get people to show up to the office and get them in there successfully and everything else. And then with the shift to online, we've definitely seen a lot of uptick on unmoderated online usage. And I think we've seen the space of the tools around what you can do through kind of different unmoderated test and approaches like really evolve as well. And so we see like just a lot of trends moving in that direction, and super excited to partner with those tools and pull that stuff into our workflow as well.
Great. So some of the improvements we're making here, we started with just a simple test, I'll say, on the participant side, which is sort of usability best practice of making the call to action as clear as possible. So what we can now what you're seeing is that in the project builder, you can add a specific link to the task, whatever you're trying to get the participant to do, which could be a survey or a usability tool. And then we make that call to action as clear as possible everywhere the participant sees it. So this image is of the email, but also on the calendar invite, and also on the confirmation screen. It's just very clear what they have to do. And through this small sort of initial intervention, we've already seen an 8% uptick in completion rates of unmoderated tasks. And we think there's a lot more to do here to streamline this flow, such that a participant could really just go from taking a screener to taking the task to getting paid a lot faster. So excited to do more investment here. The other main theme, as I mentioned, is improving the researcher experience, and we're primarily doing this through integrations. So there are a few points of friction with the way that the researcher experience today. One is just tracking the status of the participant. So, or I guess the first one is when you're setting up the project today, you have to set it up in user interviews and then potentially additionally in whatever other testing tool you're using. The next is tracking the status of participants. So understanding if I sent them the link, did they actually do the task, or am I still waiting for them to do the task? And then the final is closing out the project. And what we're doing through our integrations, first of all, with Lookback, is that you can now connect user interviews and Lookback to remove some of those steps. So by connecting user interviews and Lookback, you can automatically send a link and track the participant. And once they've completed the task, you will see the task directly in your user interviews dashboard, and then you can mark them complete all in one step. So we've just launched this in the last month, seen some initial traction with lots of users trying this out, and we're excited to hear more.
Carol, I've got a relevant question from Nicholas, although I think you partially just answered it. Can you clarify what unmoderated survey participant progress tracking would look like? Is it more detailed than simply completed, not completed? So maybe the relevant question after having already addressed Lookback is, will there be a standard there that we'll maintain, or will it be tool by tool?
Yeah, so it depends a little bit based on the tool and what they provide. So Lookback is a case where they don't actually have a status of completed. So what we're doing in their case is just dropping the link to the recording that basically indicates completed on the dashboard. With different tools, like a survey tool, which I'll share in a moment, they will be able to tell us that it's completed, and then we can sort of automatically, we'll know that it's automatically done. We're also planning to track in some cases that they've started, so that we can get a better sense, just the number of people who are sort of in the process of taking the task.
Yeah, I think depending on the type of test, like that drop-off step of like they engaged with it but didn't finish it, may be more or less useful. But if we can get that data back and surface it, then we can start to help people remind folks and do all that kind of stuff where you can really kind of close the loop with people, who maybe didn't get over the hump on the task.
Great, cool, and great to see your note, Nicholas, on Qualtrics, on being helpful to see that we've started it. So we're very excited to have launched Lookback. We have another integration in progress, which is with SurveyMonkey, so a survey tool. And very similar to Lookback, where you set up and you can connect your account, your user interviews account with SurveyMonkey. Then you can select among the surveys that you have available in SurveyMonkey. And then when you're done, when the participant's done, we will, in your user interviews dashboard, mark both the status of the participant and also have a link to the survey. So when you are closing out the project, you can very quickly see who has completed the survey and then pay the participant.
Yeah.
We see a lot of traction in SurveyMonkey in our platform, so we're excited to take on this one next.
I was just gonna say the one thing that I think is really exciting for us, especially coming out of this quarter, is Lookback and SurveyMonkey, pretty different tools, different workflows. But I think what we're finding is that there's a lot of common patterns about how we pull them into our platform and add value for the researchers and support them through that journey. And so I think we're really excited about how we can accelerate and continue to pull in other tools to follow those patterns now that we've kind of got a couple under our belt. So really excited about what's ahead here.
Yes. And we have many more tools that we are considering. I'll say these are all in sort of various different stages. Some we are highly confident we're going to integrate with, some we're just starting the conversations with. But the goal in all of them is that you can start with a user interviews panel or use the user interviews panel to work with your favorite tools. And so last time we asked you which specific tools you're using, and are definitely using that also to inform prioritization here, but feel free to lobby in the chat or in Q&A if there are specific tools that you're using regularly that you'd be really excited to have an integration with.
Yeah, there's a question in here from Nancy that's relevant that we can hit quickly in terms of, do participants see all the information we provide about a study in their initial email invitation? And there is a little nuance here. So if you're using our product, you can use it in different ways, right? So you could have document signing set up where you need somebody to sign an NDA or some other sign-off form before they're able to participate. You might be using double screening if you're pulling from our audience where you want to really confirm that the person's a good fit before moving them forward. You might have auto approve on, so if they meet all your qualifying criteria in the screener, they can move right to the task. And so what we're doing actually right now is we look through how we optimize that unmoderated flow, is making sure we figure out all of those branches and permutations and make sure that each one is streamlined and set up appropriately. So if you want to use double screening and you're manually approving, like we want to make sure that the persons don't have access to how to complete the task ahead of you, verifying that you want them to. But in the case where you have maybe for Hub no screener and you want to fast track people right to the task, making sure that in that first contact they get the task link and they're moving right through and there's no unnecessary steps. And so very much top of mind, and we have a bunch of improvements that are in the works there. So kind of a conditional answer of it depends, but we will make sure that the participants are getting the study information as soon as we possibly can with the fewest amount of steps, giving all the permutations of how the workflows can work depending on how you're doing research.
Also, happy to answer Scott's question on, is there any thought of setting up a custom API for custom tool integrations? That's definitely on our radar. Where the way we've started, as JH mentioned, is sort of identifying the patterns that exist across testing and usability tools, especially those, honestly, that have sort of a more standard API that we know how to work with. But as we're doing so and we're standardizing our process, the idea is that over time, maybe we have an API that other tools could integrate with. All right, so I'm gonna appreciate all the lobbying in the chat for various tools. Definitely Optimal Workshop and Outcome are on the radar, so appreciate that. I'm gonna switch gears to talk a little bit about Hub. So Hub is, as you know, how you can manage a panel of your own users and do research with your own users. And I'm gonna talk about several different elements of Hub, but before I get into that, I did wanna ask this question, which is when you think about doing research with your own users, it's a little bit of a different experience than working with a panel. And so I wanted to, an external panel. So I wanted to ask, what is most important to you when you're doing researchers with your own users? And some of the questions is about finding the relevant ones, managing recruitment across teams, for example, maybe making sure that you're not stepping on sales teams' toes or that you're not overreaching the same participants, communicating in the voice of tone and tones of the brand of the company, sort of the speed and efficiency for the participant themselves, and then building more information on a user over time. So potentially collecting if they're a good participant. So those are some options. Feel free to vote.
This is a really good horse race. There's been a lot of changing and lead.
And I feel like as I was explaining them, I saw them shift.
Yeah,
I think I put my finger on the scale on that one. Great. So seeing some themes around finding relevant users, and then also making sure that we're building information over time. Great. So I'll say that we hear all of these needs when we think about how to build research hubs. So you'll see solutions sort of across the board here. So this has to do with capturing a lot of information on users. So when a researcher is building out, or research ops is building out Research Hub, they often want to bring in a lot of information about users and a fair number of users. And we have a few different ways that they can bring in users. It could be through a CSV, just uploading them, through an opt-in form when a user actually sort of opts in to participate in a platform, or they could just share a link to a project and have someone come in that way. And one sort of, regardless of where someone came from, there's often a lot of data that we want to collect about these participants. So what product they use, any demographic information, as well as information on what they've done on the platform, if they've done a study recently, et cetera. And so what we find is that for some of our customers, that might be 80 columns of data that they're keeping on the users in Research Hub. So as the list of participants and the amount of data grows, we want to make sure it's easy to manage that information. So some of the things that we're doing are just making the sort of home base for Hub, which is this Hub table view, easier to use. So we've recently added the ability to hide and reorder columns so that you can see the information that's most useful to you. And upcoming, we're going to add the ability to save your view, potentially save your view across your company so that you all are looking at the same information, and potentially even have the ability so that have the ability to sort of look at groups of participants together. So maybe a group of participants who uses product A, you want different information than a group of participants who uses product B. So all different things that you can better sort of view and manage information that you have in the Hub table. And another thing that we've recently built is the ability to see where the participant came from. So it's very common, as I mentioned, that researchers might have opt-in forms in different places. They might have an opt-in form when someone provided feedback on one product, and an opt-in form when someone provided feedback on another product. And they want to know when they're doing their recruit where that person came from, so they know what type of feedback that participant might want to provide. So you can now see the opt-in form. You can now see the source of where the participant came from in the table, and also filter on that source, which should help with recruiting the right participants.
Yeah, and I don't want to be overly vague or promising things here, but the team has been doing a lot of work on like where these concepts evolve towards in terms of how you manage groups and really organize people in thoughtful ways and make it super easy to see the relevant info in those cases. And so I think a lot of exciting stuff will continue to happen here and a lot to build off of these early patterns.
Yes. So related improvement, we, as I mentioned, for any given user, we collect more and more information over time. That came out as something that's important when you're doing research with your own users, and we want to make it very easy to see that information. So we made it easier so that you can, from the table itself, the sort of home base and hub, you can go and view a participant profile. And here you can see that the participant profile has more and more information over time about any ratings that they got, any invitations that they received, any projects that they participated in, so that you can continue to build that information. Now, I mentioned that there are a few different ways to get data into Hub. And last time we talked about that we were in the process then of building an API. And the API allows us to import data for a few use cases. One is if you want to just keep the data in Hub fresh. So maybe you always want to be looking at people who use a specific product in the last 60 days. You can have the API constantly updating information about participants so that it's fresh. Another is if you want to add new participants to your Hub table without maybe downloading a CSV of those participants from whatever your internal database is. Or if you want to delete participants for GDPR reasons, all of those are good reasons to use an API where we can update information in Hub directly from your system. So this is now available. And if you're interested in using the API, definitely let us know. I would say specifically contact success@userinterviews.com. And yeah, we'd love to have you join our API program.
There were a couple Hub questions that popped up. So Red had one about, is there a way to add fields, columns to your already existing Hub, not just edit the fields? So yes, I think right now maybe is a little confusing or not as intuitive as it could be is we have you introduce new fields in places where you're adding data to Hub. So when you're uploading a CSV, if you have a column in there that doesn't have a home, there's a place to create a new field and map it right there. As you're making an opt-in form, if you want to ask a certain question and collect that data and you need a new field to capture it, you can do it in that experience as well. But there's not currently an option to go in and just like add a column that's blank for all users. And so if that's an important use case, we should follow up and better understand that. But right now, the way you do it is like where you would be adding data to that field is the opportunity to add a new field. And so probably some things we can improve there, but that's the current experience.
There's another question from Jesse in the chat. Is there a way to see notes that we wrote about individual participants with the view button?
Yeah, so there's a couple data points that like as you're doing research with participants in Hub that are not surfaced in that Hub experience that Carol was just showing. And that has been a pain point we've really identified and the team is working through. So a bunch of upcoming things on that front in terms of surfacing some information that should be visible in that profile, some of which also will probably make filterable. So a couple iterations coming in the near future on that front.
So let's see. So JH mentioned that we have a team that's really looking at the research ops or the admin perspective to make sure that we can set researchers who are using Hub up for success. So I'm going to share some of what they've been working on. And in many cases, what we're looking at here is that we want a researcher to be able to come into Hub and easily do interviews or do research with participants without having to think a lot about what the ideal experience is for the participant or how to upload and tag participants. So what we want to do is streamline that experience by giving admins more controls. The first is branding. So when we reach out to participants from Hub, our emails and communications are all branded in a few ways. So they have sort of the logo and theme of the company. They can be from a specific sender, sort of maybe like research at your company or the specific user. And they also have specific, you can create template voice and you can create templates for the email content itself. So if you want to speak with customers in a specific voice and tone or use a specific frame to get them to sign up, you can do all of that. And one thing we've heard from admins is they want to just be able to set those by default. So a researcher coming in doesn't have to think about which template to use, and it can just be automatic. So we're in the process of making defaults for all of these things. So currently you can set a default style, sort of the more sort of like look and feel. And we're in the process of also adding defaults for the content, the text, and then also the sender. So that again, a researcher can just jump in there and do research. And one thing that we've noticed is this is particularly helpful with larger teams. You can see here the stat that the average number of researchers on teams that have set a default brand is 80. So imagine very large teams here, but also just any team that wants to make sure they have a really consistent experience for their participants, this can be valuable for.
Yeah, I think we view a lot of the value on the Research Hub is helping with that team-wide coordination. And we've just heard from so many people over and over, and senior leadership roles on the research side, or research ops person who just like, I'm just not comfortable bringing my team in here until I know that they're going to be able to run these projects and contact our users in a way that is aligned with our standards. And so I think all this type of stuff is very much in that spirit, and we're really excited about solving these problems.
So related request here is that we want to make sure that we're not over recruiting any participant, reaching out to them too much. And so we do have invite rules today, which determine how many invites a specific participant could receive, just to make sure they're not getting over contacted by researchers. We also wanted to make sure that a researcher can't go in and accidentally invite way too many people and then effectively limit other researchers from being able to do their work. So we now are adding something that will limit the number of invites that a given researcher can send for a project, actually specifically based on the number of participants they request. So you might, as an admin, say, I think for a typical project, if we want to talk to 5 people, we need to send about 20 invitations. So we're going to sort of set a limit on how many invites a researcher can send.
Yeah, this is one, I think all teams have a little bit of a different approach or thinking on this. So if this is something that's relevant to you all, would love to hear any feedback that people have, because we've been working with a handful of teams on this pretty closely, and think we're heading down a good path here. But would love more feedback if you have opinions on this.
Very true. And looking forward, this is kind of a made up, silly example, but one of the things we're looking at is a few more features that we think will make it easier for research ops to bring more researchers into the hub with confidence. So one is what we have called sort of multiple teams within an organization. And this is the idea that you might have users of two different types of products. So in this example, the product is gum and chocolate, and you have gum chewers and you have chocolate eaters. And the researchers only need access to the product that they're doing research on. So if you're doing research for bubblegum, you only need to talk to gum chewers. That said, we know behind the scenes that some people might use both. And so we want to make sure that the same rules of not over contacting people apply, right? So that even if you have 2 different groups of researchers who want to talk to the same user, someone who fits in both profiles, we're not having both of them contact that user a lot. So again, the goal here is that researchers can first only talk to people that they need to, but then also not over recruit people that sort of fall into multiple groups. So that's one of the things that we are in the process of building now. And then the other is more granular permission. So you could imagine that there might be researchers with different levels of access, some who can edit panel information, some who can invite, and some who maybe can create and participate in studies, but are doing less of sort of the editing and inviting. So again, just different levels of permissions based on what someone's role might be is very much on our roadmap.
Yeah, and I think the example here does a really good job, I think, of explaining, how you want that information to be shared so that you don't, silo stuff in the wrong way. And I think just Carol and I can probably attest that it's one of those things where when you get into the weeds here, it gets very complex, but I think we're getting really close to coming back with a pretty simple and elegant way to manage this, and been a really fun problem to work on. And we've got a lot of great input from many great researchers and research ops people. So I'm excited to kind of push this forward so that you can feel comfortable with, making sure that people on your team have the right access to the right set of users, and we're not kind of, as you mentioned, giving away the keys of the castle and having everyone in there kind of seeing everything. So a lot of exciting stuff to come on this front.
Great, so just 2 more updates to share, really in the category of making user interviews available to more companies and more people. The first is on security. So we've passed our SOC 2 type 1 audit. So to verify that we are sort of up to date with security measures within the company. And a few other things we've done on the security front. One is we have two-factor authentication for researchers, so that if you sign in from a new device, we're going to just make you double check who you are, or we're going to ask for additional information to verify who you are, to make sure that no one else is getting into your account. And then similarly, we're similarly doing that same thing on the participant side. And then specific to Hub, we have recently added reCAPTCHA on opt-in forms. We have seen a few cases where a bot could get in and start use a form, or could access a form to fill in your data, which is not great. So now we're adding reCAPTCHA so that only humans can go and fill out opt-in forms. So just a few things to make sure that your work within user interviews is more secure. And the last is we want to make user interviews more usable for all types of people. So we've been making a lot of accessibility improvements in the platform to make it so that the platform is more usable for people who have any type of disability, particularly making sure that the page is readable by screen readers, or sort of navigable by touch inputs. And we've started out by working through some of the most common flows, and then are working toward other parts of the app as well. But definitely an area where we are sort of making active progress. But if you do notice that an area of our app is not accessible, we definitely love that feedback so we can continue to improve.
Yeah, and this is one where, just to echo that, within the team, we built up a lot of expertise, and we have the design team, the product team, the engineers all thinking about this, and making it much more of a point of emphasis with all the work we do going forward. But we have gotten actually a lot of super helpful stuff from some of our research clients who are truly experts in this area, and have been able to flag not only some areas where we're a little off the mark, but like recommend a pretty specific solution, which has just been a huge help to us. So not asking you all to do our work for us, but if you happen to see something, we're very open to that feedback. And when those things have been raised to us, we've usually been able to fix them within like the next week or two. So it's been a nice loop there as things get pointed out, and we're close, I think, to having all the major flows in pretty good shape. So we'll keep pushing down that front.
Great. So happy to open up now to any Q&A.
Carol, there's a question there about how SSO interacts with the two-factor stuff. Do you want to take that?
Yes, from Neil, yes. Yeah, so for now, the current plan is that if a company does have SSO, we're not doing two-factor authentication. So it's sort of one or the other, as SSO already being a security step in itself.
We've got our first new question from Kenzie. I've had multiple studies that are either focus group or 2 participants per session. Scheduling these takes a ton of time. Have you considered doing a scheduling poll, i.e. the researcher could set up availability and all approved candidates could see the times that work best for them, so that we could parcel out who goes when?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think as we look to the back half of the year and how we're prioritizing and planning, one of the biggest things we would like to get some resources allocated to is scheduling improvements. The exact timing and how we do that from a staffing perspective is still a bit of an open question, but something that's actively being discussed kind of from the top down. And I think this is an example I always point to my team of, my product prioritization is hard. Having worked on this product for over 4 years now, scheduling is something I've wanted to invest in for so long, but we've always had some more pressing needs and some more urgent feedback from researchers to kind of prioritize ahead of it, especially when the team is small. But I think we are getting to a point where we'll have some dedicated resources in the coming months to work on scheduling full time. So I don't know where that use case will fit into that, but I think the idea that we'll have people who are going out there and understanding what researchers need as it relates to our scheduling solution and how to improve it will hopefully become an increasingly big focus for us at some point in the back half of the year.
Followed by Lauren's Q, in the vein of accessibility inclusivity, any more motion on supporting incentives for additional countries for those of us who do research with global hub participants?
Yeah, this is one we hear a fair amount, and I think what we're trying to figure out is just the best route on how we go about supporting that. And so we have a current provider that we use that I believe if we expanded it out, which would take a little work on our side, I think maybe gets us like 30, 35 countries, currencies. I know there's some other vendors that have a wider reach. Then you have other tools, like PayPal or, kind of virtual currency like credit card things that are going to span in some other ways. And so that's one where we are hearing it increasingly more often as we work with larger companies with a global reach. And so coming to the forefront, I don't have an exact answer because we're still doing a little diligence on what the best solution would be in terms of how we approach that and what countries and currencies people need support in, and where that overlaps with our current provider. So something we need to take a look at, but no immediate answers there.
Neil officially in the lead as our number one question asker with 2. His second is any update on being able to balance participant characteristics within a study, either on screener or hub data. It's a classic quota question.
Yes, and it looks like Scott just threw a quota question in there as well. No exact commitments. I will say we were in a brainstorm earlier about some priorities, and this is one that was very much in the mix. And so I think we see an interesting opportunity to solve this in a way that does kind of span recruit and hub, in the sense of, on the recruit side, I want this mix of whether it be our characteristic data or screener responses, and obviously that applying to hub in some different ways as well. I think one of the things that is really interesting for us on it is just also kind of better understanding like the true demand of what a researcher needs. Right now, sometimes it's a little opaque for us, especially on recruit, where if you say, you need 10 people and you actually want 5 high income folks and 5, lower income folks or education or whatever, we don't see that in a way. So like as we're going out and targeting who to recruit, it's sometimes hard for us to know how to adjust our notification or our algorithm to make sure that we're getting you the right mix. And so there's a lot of benefits here in terms of streamlining stuff on the hub side, being more targeted and efficient with our outreach to people on the recruit side. But I will say it's a bit of a hard problem. We've taken a few looks at it. So I think it's coming to the forefront. I think it's probably sooner rather than later, but I don't have an exact timeline. But in most of the planning discussions we've been having lately, quotas and how we help with that has been very top of mind.
Scott, I think that Jade answered most of your question. I'll just respond to something you mentioned here, which is more importantly to help inform UI staff to help us target areas where we are currently weak, which I think is just a great context piece here. We are always happy to help do additional recruitment for places where you need additional participants. So shooting your project coordinator an email that's projects@userinterviews is the best way to do that. Because if we can, we're always happy to do additional invites to fill a quota you're looking for.
Yep. Yeah, and internally we've increasingly gotten a lot more sophisticated about how we understand like our sub networks of maybe where the request from researchers outpaces our participant supply, so we can be proactive in our acquisition. And so again, like we've gotten really sophisticated at that, but if we had this additional signal, we'd be able to do that even better. So there's a couple cool things that come out of this.
Question from Greg. We tend to do a good percentage of combined moderated and unmoderated projects, where we have an initial moderated interview, then 2 to 3 weeks of unmoderated tasks, then another moderated interview at the end of the study. How can you accommodate these combined moderated, unmoderated studies moving forward?
Yeah, this is there's a kind of a short-term and longer-term thing here. So short-term, if you're on a subscription with us, anyone we've sourced for you previously is available to you through the Recruit Participants tool that I think most people have discovered, but it's maybe not the most well-positioned or intuitive functionality. But from there, you can go back and find people you spoke to in the past or we've sourced for you, and then pull them into future studies on your own. So it's kind of like your own way to fulfill future studies. And so we have teams doing that sort of workflow where they'll use us to source the initial batch for this moderated interview and then pass people themselves into some unmoderated separate projects from there. But as I mentioned, as we think about scheduling and some of the problems we might want to solve there, I think one of the things that's interesting is the idea of like a continuous project or continuous research. I think we see a lot of teams increasingly doing that. Obviously, there's still a need of like very project-based research. We want to talk to 5 people to do this evaluative research to see if this prototype is lining up and this and that. But other people are just like, hey, we like to talk to 2 people a week. It's just a best practice, and it's easier if we can set it up once and just run it forever. So that's a little bit in the spirit. But I will say the caveat is our app is somewhat opinionated about moderated being quite different than unmoderated in terms of the workflow, especially as we increasingly optimize the unmoderated workflow to be really well suited to that. So it's probably not going to be that near term where you could mix moderated and unmoderated in the same project. So I think the best answer for now is to probably just pull the people you want into a separate project. And then we will look to, within a given project type, allow for some more continuous research, because that seems to be rising in prominence.
I know we're over time, so we'll make this question from Nicholas our last. His question is there a way to cap the number of sessions per day? For example, a researcher may have 6 research session slots, availability per day during the study, but wouldn't want more than 3 of those to be filled in a single day.
Yeah, so this gets back to scheduling, which you all are giving me some good signal that we should try to make sure that we staff some folks there as soon as we can. But yeah, I think that would be, when we talk about scheduling improvements we want to make and whether we're going to build or buy or look to integrate, there's a lot of open questions there, but the things that come to mind often are just like rule-based scheduling, where you can have these limits, you can have buffers between sessions, people can pick from your availability if your calendar sync, all that kind of stuff. So all very much in the mix, just a matter of us, getting some folks to focus on it full time. And I think one of the things, just to maybe close up on the scheduling loop, since it's come up a bunch, is, as you all can probably imagine, scheduling is a pretty complicated area to work in. And so it's one of those things where we haven't wanted to like yo-yo resources onto it for a couple months and then off. We think the startup cost and then the switching cost is just really high. So when we do work on scheduling, we want it to be something that we can allocate people to kind of on an indefinite basis so that we can really understand that problem space and build some great solutions. So that is the plan, and hopefully we're getting close to that. Cool. Thanks for hanging out, everyone. And thanks, Zoe, Carol, Tucker, for helping prep everything.
Thanks all. We will be here same time next quarter.
Thanks all.